He taught me how to lie. I taught myself how to document everything. That's the part he never understood, the quiet moments I spent listening, watching, and remembering every detail he thought would fade. Fear taught me to be observant. He thought it made me obedient. Gerald wasn't my father. He was the man my mother married when I was 8, the man who smiled at neighbors and slammed doors behind them. To the world, he was polite, dependable, a good provider. Inside our house, he was a storm in a suit. He had this way of lowering his voice right before he said something cruel, like it made the words more civilized. "You're too sensitive," he'd say when I flinched. Or, "You should be grateful I even care." That word, grateful, became a weapon. He'd remind my mother of it, too. Every meal, every bill, every sigh. He'd count what he'd done for us like a man checking receipts. And she tried to keep the peace. My mother was the kind of woman who apologized to strangers for things she didn't do. But over time, she stopped apologizing. She just got quieter. As a child, you learn to adapt. I learned to read moods faster than I did from textbooks, to walk soundlessly through hallways, and to fake a laugh when silence felt dangerous. School became my sanctuary. I stayed late, joined clubs, volunteered for anything that kept me away from that house. By the time I turned 18, I left for college under the excuse of wanting independence. But really, I was escaping a man who believed control was love. My mother didn't come with me. "I can't leave him," she whispered once. "He needs me." It took years for me to realize that was code for, "He's made me too small to imagine freedom." For a long time, I tried to move on. I built a life, modest, stable, mine. I sent my mother money when she'd let me. But every phone call felt shorter than the last. She'd talk about groceries, the garden, and his new business idea. And I could hear the exhaustion under her voice even when she tried to hide it. Then, one winter morning, I got the call. My mother was gone. No warning. No goodbyes. Just gone. The funeral was a performance. Gerald stood in the front row, tears perfectly timed, voice heavy with grief. People hugged him like he was the one who'd lost everything. He even gave a speech about love, duty, and the sanctity of family. I stood in the back and clenched my hands so tightly, my nails left marks. Afterward, he pulled me aside near the parking lot. He said, "You ought to be thankful I took care of her all these years. You wouldn't understand responsibility." I didn't say a word. I just looked at him and realized I was done being afraid. That night, when everyone else was asleep, I went through the boxes from my mother's house, the ones he didn't care about. Inside one of them, I found a single envelope. Bank statements. Loan papers. Receipts. Numbers that didn't add up. And just like that, his empire of lies started to unravel. It started with numbers, neat rows on a page that didn't belong together. My mother's signature on documents dated after her surgery. Withdrawals from her savings that went straight into Gerald's consulting account. It wasn't grief that hit me first. It was disgust. I wasn't a detective. I was just someone who'd spent years learning how to notice small things. And the thing about men like Gerald? They don't think anyone's paying attention. He always bragged about being good with money, about running his affairs properly. But the man couldn't resist showing off. Every time he got a new car or posted pictures from some golf resort, I'd wonder how he could afford it on a retired accountant's income. Now I had my answer. He'd been siphoning my mother's savings, piece by piece, under the name of family maintenance. For 2 weeks, I barely slept. I collected statements, emails, and even scanned copies of checks he'd signed on her behalf. Each document was a small truth he thought would stay buried. And with every file I found, I felt something inside me shift. Not rage. Not grief. Something colder. Something closer to clarity. When I visited his house again, it was like walking through a museum of his vanity. Framed certificates, golf trophies, a wall of family portraits, except the one with me was gone. Typical. Rewrite history when the real one doesn't fit your story. He greeted me like a politician. "Good to see you, kiddo," he said, like nothing had ever happened. "I hope you're holding up." I smiled. "Trying to," I said. "I came to help sort Mom's things. You know, close her accounts, finalize the estate." He waved his hand. "Already handled. I took care of everything." Of course he did. But the beauty of a liar is consistency. They reuse the same patterns. They trip over their own confidence. That night, I contacted my mother's old lawyer, the one who handled her will years ago. He remembered her. He also remembered something else. She updated her will in 2019, he said. "Left everything to you. Didn't Gerald tell you that?" My stomach went still. "He came in later," the lawyer continued. "Said she changed her mind and brought a new copy. But I never saw her sign it." That was the moment everything crystallized. Gerald didn't just steal from her. He'd erased her final wish and replaced it with his own signature. I didn't go to the police right away. Not yet. Men like Gerald don't just deserve to be caught. They deserve to be seen, stripped of the performance they've built their entire lives on. So, I planned. Slowly. Precisely. I backed up everything to a drive. I printed duplicates. Then I reached out to the one group of people he couldn't control, the investors from his charity foundation. It was time for his mask to fall, not in court, not behind closed doors, but in front of the same crowd that once called him a pillar of integrity. The estate meeting was set for Friday morning, neutral ground, downtown, glass conference room with a view of the city Gerald always bragged he helped build. He dressed the part, of course, navy suit, polished shoes, smug composure. His kind of battlefield. He greeted everyone like it was a press conference, handshake for the lawyer, a charming nod to my mother's cousin, a theatrical sigh about how hard this loss has been on us all. Then he looked at me, the estranged stepdaughter, quiet, invisible. His smile said it all, "Don't even try." So I didn't. I let him talk. He walked through every point in the will with a smooth voice, pausing dramatically like he was reading poetry. Margaret left the house to me, the accounts, jointly managed, her personal effects to be divided between family. And then, as if on cue, he placed a hand over his heart. She wanted me to take care of everything. To preserve her wishes. For a moment, silence. The kind of silence that demands respect. Then I opened my laptop. "Actually," I said, voice steady, "I found something in her personal files." "Something you didn't include." The lawyer frowned. "What do you mean?" Gerald's face twitched, just once. "She's confused," he said quickly. "Grief does that. But the thing about confidence is, it crumbles when it's interrupted." I slid a printed document across the table. The original will, signed, dated, notarized, 2019. Margaret Elizabeth Rowe left everything, assets, house, accounts, to her daughter, Evelyn Rowe. Me. The lawyer's jaw tightened. I drafted this version," he murmured. This is my copy. He turned to Gerald. So where did your version come from? The room changed temperature. You could feel it. Gerald's mouth moved, but nothing came out. He stammered something about last-minute revisions, but his voice broke halfway through. I let him hang there. The silence did more damage than shouting ever could. I clicked the next file, an audio recording. My mother's voice, weak but clear. Gerald, I already told you, everything goes to Evelyn. I don't want her left out of this family again. You could hear the edge in her tone. The kind of truth you can't edit out. He lunged for my laptop. You don't know what you're doing. I didn't even flinch. Actually, I said quietly, I know exactly what I'm doing. Then came the final blow, copies of his fake withdrawals, forged checks, and transfers from her account into his consulting fund. Each page landed on the table like a verdict. The lawyer gathered them wordlessly, eyes narrowing. Mr. Rowe, this looks like fraud. Gerald's charm drained out of his face. He mumbled something about clerical errors. But the investors, the same ones he'd bragged to for years, were already whispering. One of them stood up and said, You might want to talk to your attorney before saying anything else. I didn't smile. Not yet. I just packed my laptop, stood, and said, You spent years teaching me how to be small. Turns out, I just needed a bigger stage. Then I left him there, sitting in a room full of people who finally saw him for what he was, not a patriarch, not a provider, but a parasite. As the elevator doors closed, I finally exhaled. The city below looked different, sharper, cleaner. Like the skyline had been rewritten. It took 3 days for the headlines to start. Local accountant under investigation for forgery and estate fraud. They didn't mention my name, I didn't need them to. Everyone who mattered knew. Gerald's face, once always glowing with artificial confidence, now looked like parchment, thin, creased, exposed. His so-called friends withdrew. The foundation board suspended him. The neighbors whispered. He had built an empire of reputation, and I had dismantled it with receipts. But this wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about truth finally breathing on its own. The court ordered a temporary freeze on all assets until the case closed. The judge reviewed the will, the recordings, and the transfers. I didn't even have to speak much, the paper spoke louder than I ever could. When the ruling came, it was quiet. The property was mine. My mother's savings restored. Gerald barred from serving as executor or trustee for any estate again. And that, more than any punishment, was the perfect irony, stripped of the title he loved most, the man in control. The day I walked back into the house, my mother's house, I expected it to feel hollow. Instead, it felt honest. Dust and echoes, yes. But also sunlight through windows that hadn't been opened in years. In the study, her handwriting still marked the edges of books, always double-check the numbers. I smiled. She would have liked the symmetry of it all. I didn't keep much. Just her ring, her journal, and one framed picture, me, age 8, standing beside her at the porch. Gerald had once said that the photo cluttered the wall. Now it hung in the center of the living room. A week later, I met him one last time. Outside the courthouse, gray sky, faint drizzle. He looked smaller, as if gravity had remembered him again. He tried to speak, something about forgiveness, maybe mistake. I let him finish. Then said quietly, You taught me that power was about taking. My mother taught me it's about keeping your word. I just chose the better lesson. He lowered his eyes. No excuses left. For the first time, he saw me, not as a child, not as an inconvenience, but as the consequence. I turned away before he could answer. People assume revenge is loud, that it ends with shouting or broken glass. But the real kind, the kind that lasts, is silent. It's walking through the ruins of what once controlled you and realizing you don't owe anyone a single word. That night, I sat on the porch where my mother and I used to talk. The air smelled of rain and cut grass. The kind of scent that feels like a clean start. I looked at the lights of the city, the same skyline I'd once watched through the window of that same house, dreaming of escape. Now, it wasn't an escape anymore. It was homecoming. And as the night settled in, I whispered, not to Gerald, not to anyone else, but to the memory of her. We're even now, Mom. The house remembers who it belongs to.